Welcome to the Rhythm Roast Cafe. We are sitting here this evening with Dan and Tom, and we would hope that you can join us in your own dialogue. This evening's discussion is, how did American politics lose its civility? Or did it lose its civility? Was there ever civility in American politics? I'm going to start this off with a little discussion taking us back to 1800, when Thomas Jefferson found that he was in the race of his life for an election. And he was running against Adams, John Adams. And they were on the edge of this election. It was the early days of our country. And actually, John Adams was originally his friend, who was a philosophical and political foe of Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson, unlike what we do today, we have social media platforms. But in 1800, the social media version of the platform was journalists and pamphleteers. And in that case, James Callender was engaged by Mr. Jefferson to attack and assist him in getting his story out about Mr. Adams. And he secretly funded Callender's attacks on Adams, and he had Adams denounced as a hypocrite and a warmonger. Callender declared he behaved neither like a man nor a woman, but instead possessed a hideous how do you say that?
Hermaphroditic.
Hermaphroditic. I know, and I do that normally well, and I beat that up today. Anyway, so Adams' supporters retaliated, and they called Jefferson an atheist and seized on racist attitudes, dubbing him the son of a half-breed Indian squaw.
Oh.
When all the name-calling was done and the operatives finally put down their quills, Jefferson won that election. Now we can fast forward 225 years later.
You skipped the fact that they both died on the 4th of July within hours of each other, and they were pen pals up until the day they died.
Absolutely. And you took the fire away from me at the end.
Oh, I didn't know that was your conclusion.
Yes, and that is the point. And I'm glad you got us to that point. That is the point. The point is the people today that, as we talked earlier about Trump derangement and all this, are they at some point going to be able to sit at a table like the three of us and have a civil conversation after all of the rocks that are thrown? And so I set the stage for our discussion this evening. Have we always had a lack of civility in politics, or is it something that has happened 225 years later?
Well, there's always been a certain lack of civility. It depends on the issues of the day. Andrew Jackson, I mean, he hated people. He said when he was old that the two things he regretted, that he hadn't hanged John Calhoun and horsewhipped Henry Clay. I mean, he killed a man in a duel. over politics.
That's true.
Dickerson. And he had a duel with Thomas Sevier, who was the big kahuna in East Tennessee. And that duel turned into kind of a laughing stock. There was no blows given, but they thought they were going to fight. And then, so it depends on the issues. In the 30s, things were pretty rough politically. The conservatives thought that Franklin Roosevelt was like Lenin, you know. He probably saved capitalism in this country. You can make the case
argument.
that he saved capitalism in this country, but a lot of the people back then thought he was really dangerous guy. You had in the early 50s when they call you a communist, and so there have been periods when there was incivility, but there have been periods where things were pretty civil. I think the later 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s were pretty civil. And then when you had the downfall of American manufacturing, and that opened up a lot of strife. You know, there have been results of that.
I don't claim to be as proficient in history as you. However, I did live through the 60s, you know, and I'm a shade older than you, not much, 3 or 4 years, okay, but old enough to know that I was going to Vietnam. Okay? If I wasn't going to college or married and had 2 kids, I was going to Vietnam, all right, no 2 ways about it. So as far as the vitriol and when I felt the beginning had begun with people in the country not looking at ourselves as one nation, as somebody to respect the other side, it started in the 60s. And it continued through Ronald Reagan. And the reason I say it continued through Ronald Reagan is he is the first sitting president, in my recollection, that ever demonized the Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, okay? Because he couldn't get his legislation passed the House of Representatives. Republicans didn't have the House. They had the Senate, but they didn't have the House. And he couldn't get his signature bills passed. And he was so magnanimous on TV, because he was an actor, that he used it. He was the best user of TV since JFK. You know, he got on TV and he sat there and he told the American people with a bleeding heart how he had done everything he possibly could, but this demon, Tip O'Neill, sits up in his perch, you know, and blocks everything for your good nature. Now, I agree with you, and it's the way some things are worded that makes the difference, okay? I'll give you a for instance. There's a lot of stuff that I think is just headline prone, and it leaves out what I call the Paul Harvey, which was the rest of the story, okay? They give you the headlines, but they don't give you the meat, the content. Here's one, okay? Nancy Pelosi, years ago, 3, 4, 5 years ago possibly, okay, during Trump's first administration, I believe, proposed a bill in the House, because she was Speaker at the time. And that bill was supposed to balance the budget and pay down the debt. And the reason it was going to do that is it was going to put a tax on income that was not on a paycheck, a FICA tax, not an income tax, a Federal Insurance Compensation Act tax, okay? Because guys like Warren Buffett paid 0. Guys like Bill Gates, 0, okay? Anybody who got their income from interest or dividends and not a paycheck does not contribute to FICA, okay? They just don't, all right? So if you had a tax, she proposed that the first $100,000 be exempt, okay? That you can earn up to $100,000 in interest and penalty and principal and all that other stuff you want to earn. After $100,000, now you have to pay tax on it at the same rate that somebody else would at FICA, which was 7.5%.
Tie off, we're drifting.
Well, that's the whole thing. I mean, he wanted to put that headlines, okay, is Nancy Pelosi wants to tax your IRAs
Right.
because you get interest off your IRAs. Left out the $100,000, exemption part, and went right to that. So you read the headlines, you don't see the content. All you say is that bitch. She wants to tax my IRAs. If already I put it in here so I could avoid being taxed. All right. So that's how it happens. When you don't get the rest of the story, that develops into this polarization. You have a polemic position. Other than that, it's an issue of control. It all bases down to control. You want to control the vote. You want to control the social life. You want to control the laws. So you do things like gerrymander when
Yes.
you have the power to do it. And when you gerrymander, what does that do to the other side? That frustrates them. Correct?
That's
I
correct.
mean, no matter if you're Republican or Democrat, if the Democrats are in power and they gerrymander like this, you sit there like this and say, well, wait until the next census, and the next governor, we're going to come back and do the same thing to you. And you see that happening right now with the states that are going to gerrymander in the middle of a census. Okay, it started with what, Texas? And now it's gone to California, and they're going to go back and forth. This is ridiculous. This is crazy. This is self-destructive, and there's nobody coming out saying it is strong enough. They're doing the whataboutisms to each other, and that's where we're going with this polemic stuff.
Well, I always got taught in politics, the idea was to get your narrative out there before someone else got their narrative out there. And you stated that narrative first because that's what would stick. Anything you do after that looks more like you're protesting or you're trying to reform what they say.
No, what you're saying is a classic playground tactic. You attack and brand, and once you've attacked and brand first, anything that person says in retribution, in defense, or anything else becomes the old classic playground. I know you are, but what am I? Okay, and you sound like Pee Wee Herman. And that's the problem. Okay, that's where the whataboutism comes in. Somebody attacks and they said, you did bad tariffs back in 20 whatever it was, right?
Right.
And then we go back and forth down the rabbit hole of whether that tax was bad, okay, or the tax that it depended upon before. You never get to where you want to go. You just deflect, pivot, and then you start getting angry. When you start getting angry, then you go to alliteration, demon dummy donny, okay?
Right.
I'm going to beat you. I'm going to give you 3 Ds, instead of just 2,
That's interesting. But, I guess as a lawyer, when we are in a courtroom and you're in front of a jury, again, you want to get your message out. Sometimes you will pass and let the other side make their opening statement rather than you do, because you then want to be able to collaterally attack it. What you want to do is leave with the jury something they can talk about in the jury room that they will remember. And so it's kind of interesting. When Trump will mention that somebody is an Indian, he's doing it because he's trying to cast a sign or a vision or a picture that people remember. Not necessarily the individual, not necessarily what they're doing, but he tries to make these things, cast them in good or bad.
No, he cast an aspersion. Now, you say Indian. I'm not thinking Indian. I'm thinking Elizabeth Warren.
Right, exactly right.
Okay,
And that was my point.
In an ironic, sarcastic, politically pundit way, okay?
Right.
That Indian, because she claimed to have some DNA connection to Cherokee tribe or something like that. I think half of the Appalachian area claims to have Cherokee.
They're all Cherokees.
I mean, so it's not. I mean,
If
know
there
how
were
many
so many
Cherokees
Cherokees,
I ran into?
how did they get pushed out of there? If they were,
Chippewa, Cherokee, you name them, okay? But you never hear I'm part Sioux, okay? I'm part Cherokee. I'm part Saskatchewan or something, It's just.
Well, do you think that you can win an election if you follow in
I
a
mean,
civil way?
without being casting dispersions or
Yes.
aspersions. And I don't know. I think it'd be tough right now because you'd be seen to be soft, regardless of which party you picked. Okay, so far it's the Democrats that have seemed to be soft because of their unwillingness to dress up political figures in caricature robes and make political statements by making their. I mean, I've seen some digital creators do
Yes.
that, okay? And that, I think, just creates a division because you're not, the digital creators that make these examples of the other party by making caricatures that are more obnoxious than the caricatures of 100 years ago in newspapers. Because that's where it all started.
Yes.
Okay? The old
cartoons.
newspapers 100 years ago would make caricatures.
You look at political cartoons from the 1700s,
Yeah.
the 1800s in this country. They're pretty rough. They're pretty rough.
Yeah, and we're at that now. Only we use digital. We don't have to use the
Well,
TikTok creates a much
people
better.
want things to be simplistic, and I know the difference between simple and simplistic.
Mm-hmm.
People want things simplistic, and they can grab it and run with it easy, quickly.
Well,
So then you look for something to
but-
get attention. One thing I think I've written, is that the Democrats, they don't give you anybody to hate. Hatred is
That's
a
right.
powerful tool in elections.
Or fear. Fear is
and hatred.
probably
And-
even
and-
more
and
than
the
hatred.
Democrats, they tell you to fear something that's more theoretically. Well, we should fear the loss of democracy. say.
Yeah.
Well, people say, well, that'll never happen. But this guy tells me I should fear losing my job, and I can see that happening.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd think the Democrats would be the people that say you should be afraid of losing your job. But anyway, hate is very strong, and the Democrats, don't push hate. Now, is that a good or bad? I'm just saying they don't.
We had John chime in, and he said the muckrakers, they were the original political Satanists in print, I believed.
Well, that
Oh,
was
I'm sorry, not Satanists, Satirists.
satiric.
The muckrakers.
That was like
Muckrakers,
late
yes.
1800s, early 1900s.
Well, that was during the know-nothing parties.
No, that was after them.
They were journalists, though. Most
They were
muckrakers
journalists,
were.
yeah.
Yeah, they were. It's kind of
It's
interesting.
like going after the Tweed Ring. When I think of muckrakers,
Right.
I think of the Tweed Ring in New York in
Well,
1870s.
what was Randolph Hearst? Didn't he have a yellow sheet paper that he promoted that
Yeah.
was strictly
yeah, but-
political, right?
But the muckrakers were reformers. They were looking for reform. They were looking for bad things and writing about it. And sometimes, they were gilding the lily or whatever, making it.
Well,
The word isn't coming.
as a
Word-
union guy, where do you sit on the use of the National Guard to come in and assist the police in various cities?
Well, as a union man, when I think of the National Guard, I think of them as strike breakers.
That's
They've
what I
used
was
them-
thinking.
They've used them as they've used the regular army as strike breakers. When they weren't fighting Apaches, they would break
You
strikes.
know that they've killed more than 1,000 union guys?
Oh, out in Ludlow,
Ludlow,
Colorado,
they
and
called,
yeah,
those were men, women, and children at the mine.
yeah. No, I don't.
21
I
or
don't.
27, something like that.
The National Guard. I don't like. I would rather
We're not
see.
talking
I
to
would
four
rather.
people
I
at
would
Kent
rather
State.
see the regular army go in
Than the National Guard.
than the National Guard. When Eisenhower had to desegregate the schools in Little Rock,
Yes,
he sent the regular army.
but he was an army guy, so he saw that as
Yeah.
I mean, he was an
But
army
I mean,
guy.
they talked to him about he should use the Guard, and he said, "No, I'm going to use the United States Army." Not the national, because the National Guard is too political.
That's what I was thinking. I mean, they have to be, because 90% of their time, they're political on the outside, when they're not in the Guard.
Yeah.
A soldier has 100% of his time occupied by the Army.
And they're officers in the National Guard because they're politicians.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Whereas regular army, the guys from
Didn't they shoot a bunch of people in Pittsburgh too, for U.S. Steel to
Oh
strike
well,
there?
there's just been hundreds of shootings. And,
Well, they backed up the Pinkertons.
yeah, the army.
The army came in. The
They
National
came into
Guard
Chicago,
came and backed up the Pinkertons and shot the
during
Unions.
the Pullman strike.
You know.
But we used the
Remember
National Guard during the Democratic Convention.
Yeah, we
last
did.
summer.
And I can't. My father was unfortunate enough at the time. I was maybe a teenager. Coming back from Michigan, he used to always take 1220. And he brings you right through Marquette Park.
Right.
And all of a sudden, he had no idea. All of a sudden, we see a tank. There's a tank right there on the corner by, I think it was Pulaski or Cicero, something like
Right.
that. And you had to go around. And he goes, put on the radio. We got to see what's going on. We've been invaded.
But they've regularly done it with a number of different conventions, both Republican and Democrat, if you look across the country. The last time we did it was here in Chicago last summer when we had the Democratic convention here.
I
So
didn't see the National Guard here.
they did have the National Guard in.
Were they on
yes.
alert or were they actually deployed?
They were actually deployed. They actually had them. They had them around the United Center. They had them in and about the United Center.
You know,
when
it
we were down there.
costs $300 a day to deploy a single National Guard guy, between food, equipment, shelter, all that, and then logistics. $300 a day. So the people, if the federal government requires them to come out, then the Fed has to pay a lion's share of that.
Right.
But if they don't, if it's the governor that says, yeah, we want to issue the federal,
Then the governor
the
pays it.
federal doesn't have to pay. Well, the federal gives a contribution,
Right.
a steady contribution, but it doesn't have to increase that contribution.
Well, in that case, I don't think the president issued that. I think last summer that was the governor.
I was going to say, I can confirm, looking it up here, that the National Guard was deployed in Chicago for the 2024 Democratic National Convention. And that was just to enforce security for the event.
Well, they're a force multiplier. I mean, if it's kind of interesting. In Rosemont, we always had full-time police, public safety. We had part-time public safety. And now, because they needed a force multiplier, now they have community service officers.
Right.
And the community service officers don't carry a gun, but they're still driving around with marked cars. So if you're thinking about doing something wrong, you know that the community service officer at least has radios and can
Chicago
bring in.
used to call them social workers.
Yeah. But I think the discussion with those kind of things is use of force multipliers. Just having more eyes, not necessarily having more guns, more baseball bats, more bayonets. It's having people out there.
It comes down to this. It's a matter of control, all right? And the people who want to control the Second Amendment versus the people who want to control life, all right? So what's the border for you? I mean, when does it become too expensive to keep the Second Amendment? Would you sacrifice your grandson for the Second Amendment? Would you sacrifice your sibling's grandkid, your nephew, for the Second Amendment? Would you sacrifice 6 of your neighbors down the block for the Second Amendment? Okay, that's what it comes down to. How much control do you need to have in order for you to feel comfortable that you get what you think is your right? To own a gun, to use that gun when you think it's appropriate and when you think the law says it's appropriate, and give a damn about somebody else and say, well, they weren't given the right amount of supervision. Their parents should be thrown in jail. Or their neighbors who saw him outside shooting squirrels with that gun should have been put in jail for not turning them in. That's turning everybody into that same state of police state that you were talking about, right? If you think the community should be posse comitatus for the gun owner, okay? Take away the guns, I can guarantee you'll be Australia. 0 gun deaths. 0 kids shot by a gun.
I have to respectfully disagree.
Now we're
on that.
off the rails.
We're off that. But I got to address it this way. I think taking Illinois as a state, north of I-80 and south of I-80 is a totally different world. And I had the great opportunity to practice law in McDonough County, where Western Illinois University is. And I had this mental brain fart in a sense that I was completely mind screwed to think about guns in many ways you talk. And so I walk in, and I was a special county prosecutor as well down there in McDonough County. And I walk in one day to the courthouse, and the screening equipment's pushed under the stairs. And here's a Cook County guy that's been brainwashed about safety, and they're not screening anybody walking in. And I walk into the misdemeanor courtroom. I'm going to prosecute it. It's February, packed with coats. Everybody's in there. And I lean over and I ask the clerk, "Where's your deputy?" And she says, "We don't have a deputy in misdemeanor counsel." I said, "Oh." I said, "Shit, that's not good." So I now launch into sounding like I'm in Cook County. I need everyone to take your winter coats off. I need to see your hands at all times. Nobody steps past the rail until you're called in front of the judge. I go through this whole big lecture. And the judge by now is out and he sees this. And I can see that he's smiling. And the best
So
part was...
what happened?
So what happens is, after all of this, we go through the call. We're done. The judge says, "I want to see you in my chambers." He says, "Okay." I walk into chambers. He laughed. He said, "Roy," he said, "there's at least 5 guns in the courtroom this morning." He said, "You have a pen in your pocket because that's your tool." He said, "Those are livestock farmers, and they need those guns to protect their livestock." He said, "Walk around the town square when you get out of here." He said, "See how many shotguns are on the racks." He said, "In fact, see how many shotguns aren't even secured in those trucks and no one touches them." Okay? My point is, we have to pay attention. And whether it's going back to what our topic was about civility, it's about the perceptions. And this is what you and I had talked earlier on. It's all about perceptions. My perception was a Cook County guy, and it was drilled into my head. Again, the social media drives it to you. The newspapers drive it to you. I go down to Macomb, that's a total different world, and it's not being driven into those areas. And the better part of the story is this judge was raised in Wilmette and went to New Trier. And he told me with a smile, it took him about 10 years to get acclimated to being down there. My point is, it's this concept. And so it's our way of figuring out the perception of what we see. And so maybe the civility was not seen the way we look at civility today. So I put this forward. Did they see it in Jefferson's era as not being civil, but merely a tool, and we see civility different today?
You say your name's J. Palmer Cass. What's the J stand for? The worst period was between the War of 1812 and the War of the Rebellion, when slavery was a big issue. You had a senator that got the hell beat out of him on the Senate floor by a congressman.
That's right. Right in Congress.
And you had a guy from Illinois took a rifle into the House of Representatives because some Southerner, they'd like to challenge, Yankees to a duel, and the Illinoisan says, "Well, we can just do this right here, right now. We don't have to have a duel. I can just plug you now." Because, Illinoisans were rough and ready back in those days. Yeah. And then, of course, we had the rebellion. The slave owners' rebellion.
But was it a rebellion?
Oh, it was a rebellion, yeah.
Was it more of an economic war?
Well, that was their economics, but it was based on a Roman form of economy, okay? That's 2,000 years old. It wasn't.
That's true.
It wasn't a modern economy.
They weren't keeping up with the North in terms of money, and they were going to lose political power. The Midwest has lost political power.
That's true.
But we have not rebelled against the United States.
Well, I don't know. The governor is working on rebelling against the United States. I think that is the discussion, because the governor has basically declared the fact if the federal government comes in, he's going to push back, and he's defending the rights.
They're having a testosterone pissing match right now because both of them have aspirations of greater office. The Donald thinks that he's going to get the Constitution rewritten so that he can run again. However, if he can run again, that means Obama can run again. But even worse, it means Clinton can run again, okay? He might have a problem with Obama, but he'll get wiped by Clinton because Clinton has both Republicans, Democrats, and
That's true.
independents. You know, and he's got business. Business was never better than during the Clinton years.
Oh yeah, he was
okay?
because he was a conservative.
You're very
He was a
conservative
Democrat.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, so if Trump wants to rewrite the Constitution, he better be careful what he wishes for. You know, and then of course Pritzker thinks that well, if one hotel tycoon can make it, why not me, right? And I think, all in all, I kind of like what Pritzker's done. I mean, number one, he made money out of pot, which he was smart to do. Okay, he and Newsom, and the governor of Colorado.
Colorado.
Okay, those were the three governors that led the opportunity charge. Okay,
Michigan outsold every state last year.
what?
Michigan had higher revenue than any other
Oh
state
yeah,
in
Michigan
cannabis
too.
last
I
year.
forgot Michigan.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, Michigan was the first.
Yes,
I
it was.
think.
Yeah, Michigan
you
was
could,
the first.
You could grow 75 plants yourself. I mean, 75 plants was enough to keep you stocked in pot for a year. You know, you never have to, or more. You know, but I think the maximum in Illinois is what, 12 plants. Something
12
like that?
plants, yes.
Getting away from the civility discussion now, big time.
Well, we're still talking about how this has impacted
Yeah,
everything
well,
and
yeah.
our perception. It comes back to, again, perception. And what I'm saying is civility is a matter of degree. What we may consider uncivil, this is where I'm going, what we consider uncivil today may not have been uncivil before, or what we consider
I think it's the
uncivil
other way.
before,
Yeah.
I was just going to say, or the other way around. Glad you caught that. That the civility issue.
I can remember a lot of words going around with the adjective impolite. That's impolite speech,
Yeah.
which to me is a euphemism for uncivil, and it's a speech usually designated to the upper classes. They're polite. They have polite speech, and the brutish lower classes are filled with the impolite speech. And I think that was part of the appeal for Trump. He was an upper class guy that came in. What did he talk like? A combination of Archie Bunker
That's
and
true.
Ralph Cramden. He had Ralph Cramden's trophy wife. He was always the victim of the world. I mean, the lovable victim, hardworking, dedicated, couldn't get a damn break anywhere. Okay, that was him. Okay, and Archie Bunker, Archie had the most simplistic solutions for the complex problems the world has ever seen. Okay, he's the guy at the end of the bar who's drinking his shot and a beer, and can solve any problem you have within 400 words or less. Okay, that's Archie Bunker, and that was him. He gave us simplistic solutions. Got problems with the people in the South, build a wall. Okay, it doesn't say, well, it's $65 billion to build it, maintaining $4 to $5 million a year for maintenance, and then all of the patrols that still have to patrol it to make it effective. Okay, so that's the Paul Harvey he doesn't give you. Okay, he gives you the headlines. Okay, I'm going to build a wall. I'm going to make you feel comfortable. I'm going to make you feel security. We're going to get all of those illegal aliens, those criminals and those lawbreakers. And technically, if you came here and you didn't file your paperwork correctly, you're a criminal. So
Right, it's
he's
against the law.
He's 100% right. He's deporting criminals left and right. But it wasn't so long ago that each one of us, especially my heritage ancestors, came across in a bigger boat, okay? Mm-hmm. And when they landed in Elizabethtown, New Jersey, or on the eastern side of Long Island, they weren't given the choice to go back, okay? If they didn't have paperwork, which most of them didn't, and you say, well, why didn't they have paperwork? Italy wasn't a nation until 1861. There was
Right.
no place to get paperwork. And even after 1861, it took them 10 to 15 years before they developed the infrastructure to have that kind of stuff. So by the 1890s, then they had started to have actual, paperwork to give passports. But before then, you came over, and who saw you on the other side at Ellis Island? Tom Brennan, okay, or Bill Smith. It was either an English guy or it was an Irish guy, okay?
Right.
And you came over and you said, Gobbledygook Sangul, blah, 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 my name, and they ask you, what's your name? Giovanni Castrolinghi, right? Okay, George Castro, okay, and they gave you, you were signed in, and now you were part of the immigrants that came in. What happened?
Well, they're Catholics.
They're Catholics. They're Catholics.
Yeah, they were Catholics. Yeah.
So let's address another point and it was interesting. Yesterday I had a conversation with somebody that was in high school with me. Again, I do a lot of that discussion. And we talk about the fact that Thomas Jefferson and the social media at the time was journalism and was pamphleteers. And we just recently had in the news, that without going into names, that there's this great finding that a journalist received $4 million for giving a great exposure for one of the political figures. And so it's no different today. Numbers are different. Can you imagine in Jefferson's era, if you had $4 million, you wouldn't have to have done anything. But the fact was, we got in this discussion the other day, and a gentleman I went to high school with and college with, actually, and he went to the Medill School of Journalism, so this was all timely. He was the editor of the paper when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. And at the end of my junior year, I'm running for president of the student body, and who's on the other side but Sam Palumbo, well-known Palumbo name, and his brother 2 years before had been the president. So everyone thought it was a slam dunk that he was going to be the new president of the student body for our senior year. And I beat him. And I laughed because Len, who was not Italian, was the editor of the paper. And he and I were good friends. And Len did a great job over about a 2-month run, as I planned and ramped into it, of featuring me and doing a great job with the local paper that we had. And we had that discussion about the ethics and the philosophies that he went on to discuss at Medill School of Journalism. And we were talking about that the other night. And we found it kind of amusing at how we did this deal when we were 17 and he wrote the story. And my point I'm making is it's probably human nature on how it is. And the question is it appropriate if someone likes somebody and they're doing it? You do editorials. And the editorials, it's not that anybody exchanged money at the time we were in high
There's
school.
an existential, not an existential, but there's a big difference in today, okay?
Okay.
Because today, if you were going to have something to say about Palumbo, Joe or otherwise, what you would do is take pictures of potholes on streets that Joe Palumbo, and you take a picture of the Palumbo paving trucks that had paved just recently, and then you'd look up the cost to the government of those enterprises that contracted with Palumbo for Palumbo services. Or you go back to 69, 59, when was a great snowfall, when all of Palumbo's equipment was stuck in the snow on Grand Avenue and couldn't go anywhere.
1967.
Okay. And I think it was 13 inches one day and then another 20 inches the next day. And we ended up with almost 4 feet of snow within 2 days. But he came out there late with the plows, late with the graders, because the plows couldn't handle it. And we ended up with not just snow blocking traffic, but stalled trucks and graders on the middle of Grand Avenue. So yeah, that's how it would be today.
Journalists have always been for sale, and I think it's a conceit of Americans that our journalists are unbiased and are going into everything without any notions already there or without an aim in mind.
You think they're sensationalists?
Not that, well, sensationalism could be part of it, but a lot of it is politics. It's what they want. I mean, in Europe, it's understood that this is the conservative newspaper. We're getting that way now. Okay,
Fox
News is conservative, right? So I don't watch it because I know they're going to tell me conservative stuff that I don't agree with.
Because they're not a news. They're a feature program.
They're entertainment.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Entertainment. It's a better way to draft it.
And, so
And
is
they're
CNN
also a political arm of Rupert Murdoch's
right now. And most people
politics.
most people think it's Trump's arm. No, it's not. It's Rupert Murdoch's arm.
That's right.
Murdoch's.
And it's not just his. He's got 3 sons. One's worse than the other. Okay?
So there's always a goal there.
But now, by avoiding something that you consider a conservative network, you're allowing other people to interpret the understanding of the other side that you avoid so much. So you don't really get the same understanding as the other people unless you do come to a civil conversation like this. What a great
That
way to
is
bring
true.
it back around, Tom.
That has points, and that's what this
Yeah,
is
but
about.
see, well, for one thing,
You don't want to get
I read-
aggravated.
I don't at this stage in life. Yeah, 76 years old.
Yeah,
I
you got-
avoid aggravation and
Folks
anxiety.
out there, you got to remember, at 40, we have piss and vinegar yet. At 50, a little bit less. 60, we're starting to think of other things. But right now, no.
You guys do have another comment by John, too. He said, cultural relativism is a valid concept to a point. Certainly, that is the basis of the good old days that politics plays off of so often.
Well,
I tell conservatives, I said, well, you want to go back to the 50s, you want to go back to the fact that like 45% of the workforce was in labor unions.
yeah,
I said,
well,
are we going to go back to that? Oh, I don't want to go back to that.
no, we want to go back to Eisenhower in the 50s where the income tax was 95% on the 1%. It built every one of the interstates. It built the railroads. It built
Eisenhower
the O'Hare
was
Airport and all the other seaports. But it was 95% on the 1%.
He's the best president we've had
Eisenhower?
since Franklin
He's one.
Roosevelt.
He's one Republican I will never say anything wrong about. Never.
You know.
Okay.
Well, I think, yeah, I agree with you. I think to piggyback on the comment in some ways, let's go back and look at this. Let's go back to an ideal time we talked about of the 80s and the late 70s, early 80s. Let's look at that. And Walter Cronkite was the then top dog when it came to
He was the
this.
standard.
He was the standard. He was the gold standard. So do we believe that he was somebody bought and paid, or did he have that caliber and quality? And I'll give you a little bit of a statement before that. I happen to be a Chi Phi. He was a Chi Phi, different college long before I was. So I've always held him in high esteem just in the fact of being a fraternity brother. But I think that the reality is that, to me, that was the gold standard of reporting.
Well, see, he was what the English call a news reader.
Yeah.
And when you call them a news reader instead of an anchor man or a journalist, you got a whole different idea what they're up to. And or somebody's writing it, he's reading it. Cronkite was a good actor.
Yes.
He knew how to. There's Walter Cronkite.
He knew how
you
to
know.
evoke
I mean, he had the way.
emotion.
He had the way. And I think that sometimes you were seeing a real Walter Cronkite. And when you saw the real Walter Cronkite, you were seeing something you liked. You know?
Wasn't he the one that took his glasses off when Kennedy died? He had tears running
Yeah.
down his eyes.
Yes, he did. That's, yeah.
And I remember when he had a TV show in the 50s and 20th century. It was like a history.
Right, right.
And I always liked the guy because, you know, when I was a little kid, I thought, man, this guy's really cool. He knows his history.
Well, he had the pause at the right time with his presentation.
Yeah, but he also caused you to think, and he caused you to look at certain aspects of what he was reading, and I think that was important. One of the other things I see, and I think people don't look at it this way, but I have a belief, if you have a YouTube TV app, you can take and you can put 4 news channels up at the same time, and you can rotate through them. And I always find it fascinating to have CNN that you have the British channel, you have MSNBC and Fox. And almost at the same time when something's going on, it's fascinating to rotate through the 4 channels and hear how they're being
You
reported.
can do that without that app, but I did
Yeah,
that.
but-
I did that when I forgot who the general was that sent a seductive email to somebody, and it had some secrets in it that were
Yeah.
U.S. secrets, and it got intercepted, and then it got, well, the first station that showed it, because it was a conservative general. I think it was one of Trump's guys. The first station it showed it was MSNBC. The next one was CNN. It took a whole half hour before it got to Fox. Okay, they had to figure out how to spin it. You know, it's got to
Right.
have a spin in some way, and they ended up being pretty honest on it. I have to admit, but you know, their marketing when they first came out. Do you remember it? Fair and balanced.
They've gotten rid of that statement,
Okay,
though.
and yes, they came out saying, Fox News, we are fair and balanced, okay, which meant it implied everybody else was unfair and imbalanced, okay? You had to watch us. When actually what it ended up being was you had to watch them to get balance between the right and the left. You might get a balance if you saw both sides, you know. And
So do you think that the concept of civility in politics, and actually in a broader scheme, of civility in our everyday life, is driven in a main way by mainstream media? Do you think mainstream media plays a role in the civility?
no, I think now it's been taken over by social media. I think everybody's a keyboard jockey right now, and they have the anonymity of the internet to say vulgar and oh, I don't know how stuff that intimidates and ridicules other people with reckless abandon. Okay, there's no politeness on that keyboard. Okay, and if you're anonymous, especially if you're on one of these chain things like what's that girl one? Girl du jour. Okay, it's a left wing
Yes.
female thread. Or if you're on Atheist Socialist, which is another left-wing thread, and then there's a right-wing thread, I forgot what the name of it was. Or you could go to, I'm Sicilian, not Italian, get that straight. If you want to see some real polemic stuff, they'll fight over whether you call it gravy or sauce, all right?
Yeah.
And I mean, when I say fight, I mean they call each other names.
Well, you know that you see people in Congress now acting. You know, when people, I'm putting mind Andrew Jackson, the nullification. Andy by God Jackson, one of my heroes. When South Carolina was talking about seceding from the Union, and they had the theory that the state could nullify federal law that they didn't hold
Right.
with, right? And Andy Jackson went to South Carolina.
With an army?
He went by himself. He went himself. And he went to a banquet with John Calhoun, who was the leader of this cabal of proto-secessionists.
Secessionists.
And they were sitting there at dinner. And Jackson made a toast to the United States of America. You know, long may it
Live there.
exist. And he looked at Calhoun, and Calhoun drank the toast. Because Calhoun knew that if he didn't, Andy Jackson was going to come right across that table at him.
And shoot him.
And grab him and choke the light or do whatever.
Violence.
So is civility driven by money? Let me ask that question. Because today on social media, we have people monetizing the clicks. So whether I'm the newspaper, I look at the creative headline to get the clicks, and it's fascinating. On some of those things that show up on some of your normal screenshots that come in, they'll have a headline that makes you want to click on it because it makes no sense. It's like
it's
clickbait.
clickbait, call
They
it.
clickbait. So is civility or lack of civility really being driven by money? And is that not only something we can go back 225 years on and look at the fact that money is at the root of everything that we're dealing with?
Oh, there's
Well,
money. And then, manners.
Yeah.
What about, whatever, manners.
It's more control. I think it's more of a need to I have the greatest idea. I don't understand why you don't understand it. Okay? If you can't understand what I'm saying is right for you and me, it's your problem. Okay? That's the attitude we have. Okay? There's no room for compromise in some people. None at all. Okay? Because if you start to show compromise, you start to show weakness. If you start to show weakness, you're no longer the paragon of leadership, you know? So you're no longer Napoleon, right? You know, you're starting to spread your army out instead of keeping them in a column.
You,
you know?
you ever notice a lot of people that say to you, oh, you're not listening.
Yeah,
Or you don't understand. No, I understand. I don't agree.
right.
Correct. That's a good point.
Right?
Right. And then there's the Rogerians. Oh, I hear you saying that you don't like when the military shows up in full force, you know. Is that what you're saying? Am I clear on that? You know, making you restate what you've already stated. And the reason you restate that is the philosophy behind Rogerian is if you hear yourself saying the stupid things that the other person is saying is stupid, then you will stop being stupid.
That's right.
Okay? And, you know, it's kind of the opposite of the Dunning-Kruger effect. They're too stupid to know that they're stupid, so they'll keep saying the same thing, you know, over and over again. But yeah, there's a whole, when I was in social work school, there's a whole semester devoted to communication skills. And it wasn't communication skills and teaching you how to talk to everybody. It's showing what the different communication approaches are and what to expect, okay? What do you expect when you say, well, what do you expect when you hear Spiro Agnew describe the kids who are protesting the war as being the nattering nabobs of negativity? Okay? What do you expect when you hear that, right? Is that a phrase he used? Absolutely. I burned it into my brain because I thought it was so fucking cool. You know?
Well, yeah, that was, you know, when people are strong, they're not afraid to change their mind. And they don't worry that it would be appearing weak, because I'm not weak, right? But people that are weak, they're the people that double down.
Oh, they have to.
You know,
They have to save their ego.
that's all they have going. And people that are stupid.
Well, I guess going back to some of your discussion then, is a factor that drives the civility getting somebody in a corner, getting somebody that thinks they have to come out fighting? Is it a tribal?
That's what attorneys do.
That's right.
They use the Socratic method.
That's correct.
They set up a whole plan. They say, do you believe in this? Do you believe in that? And if this is true, do you believe that this comes out of that truth? And by the time you're done that Euclidean geometry of experiential communication, you've painted yourself into a little tiny corner, and that's when the attorney says, so you must be, and then he delivers the bomb. Okay, that's how attorneys figure it.
Right. So that's a way of doing it in a civil way.
Yeah, it's civil, but it's also antagonistic. You leave the other guy feeling
Well,
like he's
there's always
trapped.
going to be antagonism.
But that's
people can
civility.
be-
And I guess my better question, let me ask it the other way. Is that not civility, or do you see that
That's
as
more civil than saying you will do what I say, or I'm going to kick your ass from here till Tuesday.
Right.
Okay, that's the alternative? Yeah, it's more civil. It's what's structured to be civil. That's how we've structured the legal system. That's how we've structured our society. Okay. So I think we're pretty much at the end of our hour right now, and I've enjoyed it. We've had a couple of things. Rhonda, how you doing? Kitty, how you doing? Who else was out there? Jordan said he didn't get a chance to get on last time. Neither did Gary.
But yeah, we had we got a comment here by John too, just about social media, just saying,
Yeah.
therein lies the root of everything social media. It allows any mechanic to tell everyone about the details of biology, and we can all speak like experts as we hide behind our keyboards. With social media, our regular lives are skewed, and we as a culture are still learning to deal with that.
That's the problem with social media. It's what is truth. Okay,
That's true.
That's the problem. Can you rely on what you see? Can you take a deep dive through social media? No.
Can you believe what all the news outlets are feeding you?
No,
I can.
you can't. Well, you can't believe anything at this point.
No.
Okay, you have to do your own empirical
Analysis.
stuff. You have to get your own clinical evidence. And the problem with that is it's really not scientific. It's, again, what lawyers do. Lawyers love to have the anecdotal evidence. I know a guy who was shot by a whale, and all of those things tend to make whatever evidence you're producing null and void because you found an anecdotal evidence that counterbalances it.
That's right.
So if you want to go in the other direction, you go with the quantum wave theory, which is
Well, I think you're onto something there, but at the same time, like, look at social media as not being a negative thing, but look at it in a positive too, especially when reporting on politics and things like that. You now have people that have the power to get to the same size audience as any news outlet, just like you guys have
Yes.
with this show. And maybe they're not motivated by certain sponsors, pharmaceutical companies, things like that. They're doing this on their own accord, doing their own research. And I really think you have a better opportunity at getting the truth from people that are independent journalists for that reason. And social media can really be a huge benefit when looking at it in that light.
well, yeah, you can. I'm not saying you can't. Okay, and the greater you spread the sources of news, the more accurate you're statistically supposed to get, because your sample is greater. Okay, the problem is that you have some people who are more prolific at it than others. Some people who can be they call themselves digital creators. I'm sitting across from a digital creator.
Yes.
You're your self-described digital creator. I am not.
Yeah, you
Okay?
are digitally creating right now.
And well, I'm participating in your digital creation. If you're very proficient at it, you can use that proficiency to drown out anybody else's ideas, okay? And you could influence the society. If you couldn't influence the society, people wouldn't do it. I mean, there's no motive then.
No.
Well,
You know?
you can influence people. I mean, that.
Well, I think this is kind of how I'd sum it up. I think that we have to begin to continuously focus on common problems. And we have to end the focusing, as you just pointed out, on personalities and trying to win at all costs. I think that it's more about how do we create that discussion? How do we create that narrative to move something forward to a solution within the common problems? And that'll provide us with the civility.
Well, we're trying to do that here.
And I think we're doing a good job.
This is a first step for me. I could go on all the social media that in the groups that I'm part of, and I could dazzle them with my perspicacity, but it's not going to win me anything.
That's true.
It's not going to do anything for society as a whole. If this gets across to somebody, anybody at all, even if it's just one win, because my buddy Al Katz, who's out there, keeps telling me that I'm hopeless because I keep trying to convert people one person at a time instead of changing the narrative for everybody. And I'm not the savior. I cannot change the narrative, okay? I can only hope to make whatever impressions I'm going to make in limited amounts of quantum that I can do it, and that's where I'm at. Anyway, everybody out there, thank you for joining us. Thank you for the comments. And good night, Mrs. Calabash, wherever you are.